váltok angolra, tekintve ez egy nemzetközi rendezvény, és a rendezvény első fele angol nyelven fog zajlani. Annyit szeretnék csak magyarul mondani, hogy mivel a rendezvény első fele angol nyelven zajlik, hogyha valakinek szüksége lenne szinkrontolmácsolásra, itt tud készüléket szerezni, az 1-es csatornán magyarul, az 5-ös csatornán pedig angolul lehet hallgatni a rendezvényt. És akkor át is váltok angolra. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrea Virag. I am Director of Strategy at Republikon Institute. And on behalf of Republikon, I would like to welcome everyone to today's event organized by Republikon and supported by the Friederich Neumann Foundation for Freedom. A year ago, it seemed like that one of the most important topics of the Hungarian general election campaign is going to be the rights of LGBTQ community, as the government launched an attack on the communities and announced that a so-called child protection referendum will be held on the same day as the general elections. Due to the very successful campaign of Hungarian NGOs, the referendum was invalid, and the focus of Hungarian politics has shifted toward pressing issues like, of course, the war in Ukraine, the energy security, and the cost of living crisis. However, despite these recent shifts, we see that LGBTQ communities are still under threat, and their rights are far from satisfactory, not only in Hungary, but also in Poland and in other European countries as well. In the first panel discussion, with the help of our international experts, we are going to discuss the state of LGBTQ rights in different European countries, the actions that liberals and local communities can take, and of course the European Union's role in the issue. And in the second half of the conference, with the help of Hungarian experts, we are going to discuss the Hungarian situation. Finally, I would like to thank the Friederich Neumann Foundation for Freedom again for supporting our event. Of course, our speakers for accepting our invitation and being here, and to our audience for joining today's event. Without further ado, I will give the floor to Márton, who will be the moderator of the first half of the event. So have a great day, everyone, and have an interesting discussion.
Thank you, Andrea. Was that loud? No, it's good. Welcome, everyone, to the first panel discussion. Before we start and before I introduce our speakers, we have a video that we'd like to play from Anett, who is a board member of the European Liberty Forum. And they'd like to add a few words before we start.
The European Liberal Forum that I represent as a board member is the think tank of the ALDE party that brings together the 51 member organizations from all across Europe in search of liberal solutions for modern day concerns. And it's with sadness that I have to say that the state of play of the LGBTIQ+ community is still in the modern day one such concern. As a Bulgarian national myself, I know all too well how detrimental the conservative voices are. And I know all too well how important it is to bring this topic up for discussion and to convince the general public and the civic society that it's nothing scary, it's all about love. Thank you very much once again for organizing this conference, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the future. Have a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. And now let me introduce to you our panelists from your left to your right. We have Anett Bősz, who is Vice Mayor of Budapest, and we have Milosz Hodun, who is here on behalf of the Polish Nowoczesna party, among other things. And we also have Marja, who is current current city council member of Amsterdam, and a former police officer, also among other things, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves a little more in detail. And I am Márton Schlanger. I'm a researcher at Republikon Institute here in Budapest. So for the first round of questions, it actually consists of 2 parts. First, I would like you to introduce yourselves a little bit and your connection to today's topic, being LGBTQ rights and so on. And secondly, I would also sort of like you to introduce us to the state of LGBTQ rights in your own countries, as we are here from different countries, well, not me and Anett, but the 3 of us. We would like to hear a little bit about the current situation in your countries. So let's start with that. I think whoever would like to go first.
I think that you're watching already with deepening concern the Hungarian situation, not just from the point of view of LGBT rights, but you know that probably that the LGBT community is basically attacked by the Hungarian government in Hungary. That's a terrible situation in 2022, but their fundamental rights are damaged. In Hungary, of course, there is no same-sex marriage. There is no way for legal adoption for same-sex couples. And in their everyday life, they don't have the same rights as the other citizens. However, other social groups are also damaged by their fundamental rights. So that's a huge problem that we are facing. And of course, the Hungarian opposition is fighting for the LGBT community too, but we have more other particular and global crisis also in the Hungarian society. That's our basement that right now.
Does it work? Yeah, it does. So my name is Milosz Hodun. I'm from Poland. I'm an advisor in the Polish Liberal Party. I'm also president of a think tank in Warsaw, a liberal think tank, a partner of Republikon for many years. It's my great pleasure to be here in Budapest again and talk about this important issue. Because if you ask about the state of LGBTQI rights in Poland, I guess you also, especially in Hungary, because there's so many links between the countries, probably you've heard quite a bit that the state of LGBTQI rights in Poland is terrible. It's the easiest answer. If you want to illustrate it in a very easy way, probably you should look at the ILGA Europe rainbow ranking. And the second year in a row, Poland is the worst country in the European Union, and one of on the flop 3 or 5 in the Europe as such. I think it's only Azerbaijan and maybe 2 other countries that are below Poland in Europe. Like not only in the EU, we are the champion, right? We are the worst country. We scored, I think, 13% in the last ranking, and it's really far behind everybody else, which is really sad. And of course, rankings like that, you can comment on them. That this ranking I'm talking about basically measures law on paper, right? So everything that has been adopted, not how the people see LGBTQI rights, how the LGBTQI population feel itself, but the law on paper. But it really reflects everything else. So when Anett told us that this, and this is not present in Hungary, all that is obviously also not there in Poland, and there is much more. Much more that there is not there. And but there is also, so one thing is that all these laws that have never been implemented and probably will not be implemented anytime soon. But in addition to that, there is a lot of state-sponsored homophobia. There's a lot of the state-sponsored anti-LGBTQI sentiment. And this is something that makes the situation in Poland so difficult in the region and in Europe. So, because it's not only about the laws that have never been adopted, it's not only about the fact that we do not have civil unions, that there is no absolute recognition of same-sex relationships, not to talk about adoption, but also what's the most important and harmful, I believe, is this constant attacks of the government and their allies on LGBTQI population. Because if you look at what has happened in recent years, not many new changes, really legally speaking, that this government has done. But they have created this terrible atmosphere, and they are using every tools they have, all means they have, in particular state-owned media, which are still followed by many people, especially in the countryside and smaller towns, with all this LGBTQI, anti-LGBTQI propaganda, with all these terrible words about calling LGBTQI people no people, calling LGBTQI people ideology, similar to Marxism, or you know it from Hungary too, right? But so yeah, I guess like shortly speaking, I would say this is it. So this is like this propaganda, this fact that people are exposed all the time on this hateful speech by people from the government, by people from the church, by people from right-wing media, makes the situation in Poland really, really difficult to for LGBTQI people. Maybe one last thing. Next year, we'll have elections, 10 to 11 months. We still don't know the date. And we can already see that the government is testing the message that will work for next year. And they are attacking trans people, transgender people. It doesn't resonate that much with the society. Polish society does not really understand what they are talking about, which is good in this sense, that they try to test a few messages, you know, making the trans people the main enemy for next elections, and this is not working. But again, we have elections in a year. That will be probably the most brutal campaign we've seen ever in this country, in my country, because many people, after 8 years of breaking laws, will be fighting not only for money and the careers, but also will be fighting for not to go to prison. So I guess we'll see the dirtiest campaign with the dirtiest ways of polarizing people, and LGBTQI topic will be once again the topic used by the government to polarize the society, to mobilize their voters, so that they can try to win these elections again.
Good morning. Are you ready for some positive news? Yes. My name is Marja Lust. I am, since June 1st actually, I am a city council member for the city of Amsterdam for the political party D66, which stands for Democrats 66. Before that, I worked for the Amsterdam Police Department for 16.5 years as a criminal investigator most of the time. I also, in that capacity, was very active for the LGBTIQ police team, believe it or not, Roze in Blauw, which stands for pink in blue. Blue being the police color, pink being the general color for the LGBTI community. In that role, I have spoken to many, many people who have called our 24-hour hotline to report an incident that had happened because of their gender identity or their sexual orientation. I also was the portfolio manager of international relations. In Europe, there is an European LGBTI police association that I was the vice president of, and I had the tremendous honor of being the conference director of the first World LGBTQ conference for criminal justice professionals. That was in 2016, and actually what started in Amsterdam as a global project is now a global movement, given that the second conference was in Toronto, Canada in 2019, and in January 2023, so only in a few months, the third one will be held in Melbourne, Australia. And I'm saying all this because a lot is happening. The state of the Netherlands as far as LGBTIQ rights is much better than what we have just heard from the state of the LGBTI community in both Hungary and Poland. Still, also, the Netherlands places 13 on the list of the Rainbow Europe Index. There are a few things happening at this point in the Netherlands that might push are ranking up a little bit, and at the same time there are some developments that could push it back down again. For instance, we actually, the Netherlands was the first country in the world to have the marriage, the possibility of getting married opened up to people of the same sex. So couples, same gender couples can get married since 20 years, 21 years now already. Also, what I see is that a lot of the support for LGBTIQ rights is supported top-down. There is still a big issue with social acceptance, but it is supported top-down, and that's where it starts. I mean, when I hear Milosz say that the Polish government is already testing the message as to how we can vilify the LGBTIQ community in order to win the next elections, I remember situations in the Netherlands where there was a brutal attack on 2 gay men, and the ministers and the cabinet of the Netherlands chose to walk in the next day hand in hand. So 2 of our male ministers, 2 female ministers, they chose to walk in hand, just to give the message that this is not something that we accept in our society. So the top-down support for the LGBTIQ community, I think, is crucial. What we do struggle with, though, is social acceptance, as I just said, because there are still quite a few people who have a problem with visible homosexuality. So many people will tell you when you ask them, so how do you feel about, 2 gay men or 2 lesbian women or a transgender person? They would be like, oh, well, yeah, that's fine with me. I just don't want to see it. I don't want to see them walking hand in hand. I don't want to see them give each other a kiss on the street, because that still a lot of people find a little bit offensive. And that is also why we still have quite a few incidences, and I can speak for Amsterdam, but also for the rest of the Netherlands, because I was one of the people who answered this 24-hour hotline with the Dutch police. It started in Amsterdam, but eventually it became a national hotline that people can call if something has happened to them on the street or behind closed doors related to their sexual orientation or their gender identity. So the Netherlands is also not there yet. There's 2 important developments that are going on that can cause, like I said, the Netherlands to go up the Rainbow Europe Index from ILGA, the International LGBTIQ Association. And that is that we are on the brink of including sexual orientation in the Constitution as part of Article 1, which is our equality principle. And that is, I think, a major difference with many countries, because it is not only decriminalized in the Netherlands, there is a law that forbids discrimination against LGBTIQ people. So that's an extra level of protection. What we also now have, which is a very current issue, there is a new transgender law up for debate. And there is a good possibility that it will not make it. There are a few political parties, and of course but the Netherlands is now preparing for provincial elections, and there are a few political parties who are leaning towards the right wing who strategically choose to vote against this law in order to strengthen their right-wing profile. And what it means is that the new transgender law would allow transgender people to choose what they have as a marker on their identity document. So without having to go through any kind of surgery, they can go to, and of course there's a few provisions that people will need to first pass through, if you will. But then people can choose if they want an F for female or V in our case, or an M for male in their passport. And that is something that would really push the transgender issue forward, but there is a risk that it will not make it in the government. So as far as the 13th place in the Rainbow Europe Index, we're not there yet, but with great respect for the situation in Hungary and Poland, I'm glad that the Netherlands is at a more advanced position.
Thank you to all of you, for sharing the situation in your own countries. We mostly talked about sort of the law and the government side of things, you know, the rights and or no rights in the case of Poland and Hungary, of LGBTQ people and the community. But we haven't talked about sort of the local communities and the civil society part of things. Well, we did in the case of the Netherlands, but not in the case of our countries. So what do you see? What is the case of... we are from three very different countries in terms of LGBTQ rights. Poland sort of being the worst in this case, it seems like. Hungary not far behind from being the last, and the Netherlands where things are a bit more bright. But this is just the law side of things and paper, as you mentioned, but what about the local communities, civil organizations? What is the state of LGBTQ rights and how developed this scene is in your countries? Whoever wants to go first.
Thank you. As you mentioned, it's not just about papers, but papers are also really important because the Hungarian Basic Law defines parents as a homosexual couple. So that's definitely the opposite as your Basic Law, as your construction, I'm sorry. And, but however, the situation is terrible from the point of view of papers and government, but the local community in Hungary, the Rainbow movement is amazing, I think. So it's so great to be a part, also as a homosexual person, of these movements and festivals and protesting, and so this is simply so clever how they built up something from nothing in Hungary in a terrible situation where they find themselves. So as you mentioned before, the top-down processes and top-down support is really important. They not just don't have top-down support, but they just find closed doors everywhere. Also in the labor market, also in their everyday lives. So in this terrible situation, such a great community to build up is a really strength. And I really appreciate what they have done. And however, we would love to see bottom-up processes to meet on the horizon with top-down processes, but they are just trying to find the horizon, but they don't have it right now in Hungary, unfortunately. But on the other hand, I think in case if we will face a democratic government with new papers, new basic law and new regulations, I think we will be able to create something much more better with the Rainbow community and with the LGBTQI people. It's so important for me to see. I think they also can be a kind of role model for other social groups that also have to fight for their fundamental rights, just like the Roma community and also women, unfortunately. Women and mothers, elderly women, elderly people in general. So it's a terrible situation as we as a European member state, we have to tell you that our most of our social groups, so the majority of the Hungarian society, has to fight for equal rights and equal treatment. And I think that the rainbow community is one of the best of them. That's a really smiling movement, and it makes everyone smile. So I really love it. They give us hope. They give me hope personally also every day when I am watching them and watching their work. So I really respect them. But now we are standing over here for the time being. This is everything that we could reach, unfortunately.
Yeah, so maybe also let me start a little bit with the history, not the oldest history, but Poland being a Catholic conservative country, you all know that, where LGBTQI rights and the progressive agenda has not always been the most important. Since 1989, so since the transition, since the democratic revolution, there has been many priorities. LGBTQI rights has never been one of those, But we could always see, like if you look at data and trends, that actually the acceptance towards LGBTQI community and rights and civil partnership or even equal marriage, right to equal marriage, has been growing or used to grow until 2015. It was very clear, like if you see at the data in a long-term perspective for the last 25 years, or like since 1989 or 1990, it was the constant growth. And then 2015 happened, when again all the propaganda was used against LGBTQI people, so the growth was stopped, but we still see that the acceptance towards LGBTQI people is actually growing again. Because this polarization that we are having right now works both sides, works both ways. And it's very clearly seen in the case of LGBTQI rights and also in the case of women's rights or rights to abortion. Before 2015, there were many people in Poland who were saying, I don't care. This is not my thing, this is not my issue, I don't care at all about these gays, or I don't care about women's rights, abortion rights, the law we have, it's okay, nobody should maybe demand more, but also nobody is really suffering. Now people care. Now people have their opinion, have their rights. And so this is like a little positive thing in this terrible situation, is that many people who were indifferent before, now they actually are supporters. So this was just like a short historical introduction. And in reference to what Marja said is about trans people, the first veto of our president, Andrzej Duda, when he was elected in 2015, his first veto, and one of a few, because he does not dare to veto right now laws of his own party, was a veto against a new transgender law. Because the previous parliament, the previous majority, one of their last laws they adopted was the law that would make life of transgender people a bit easier. Because right now, long story short, to change your birth certificate, to change your to make the legal transition, you need to sue your parents in the court. You have to go to the court and sue your parents for for a mistake in your birth certificate. And it's cruel, right? It's just inhuman, because you go through all that. Many transgender people, I guess you know what I'm talking about. Like the situation is just so difficult on so many levels. And in addition to that, you need to sue your mom and your dad so that they fix your documents. So the last majority changed it, and Andrzej Duda, it was his veto. Very proud of that. I don't want to make the life of transgender people any easier. Full stop. So this was the beginning. This is one. I think it was even before Law and Justice got the majority in the parliament. It was Andrzej Duda who was the president, and we were waiting for parliamentary elections. And already then, the LGBTQI community saw, okay, something really disturbing is happening and will happen. So we'll protect ourselves even before they attack. And the civil society, the community of LGBTQI people all over Poland started to organize themselves. And it was something absolutely impressive, and it is still something absolutely impressive, that since 2015 we have so many new organizations, especially on the very local or regional level, who are fighting for LGBTQI rights. And there are many, of course, I could say many names that will not tell you nothing, because why should it? Because they're very local. And but I will just tell you that the best example, the best symbol of their achievements, I think, is the number of prides we are having in Poland right now. And so every year, before 2015, we have prides only in the major cities, you know, let's say the 5 or 6 major cities that are more than 500,000 people. Last year's, of course, COVID was a bit different, but like 2019, before COVID, I think we had 27 prides. 27. It means that we have prides coming in mid-sized towns and actually small towns that I attended with my friends who are members of parliament, and not only. We attended prides in cities that are like 90,000 people, 80,000 people. In the Polish context, there are small towns. And the local community organized that, and nothing happened in most of them. There was absolutely there was no violence, but people who lived there, they were exposed for the first time probably on the rainbow flags. They saw rainbow flags, they saw LGBTQI people, they saw the youth, they saw this positive message. So it was this positive message because LGBTQI people, they decided to do something before they got attacked, to show that they are there, that they are visible, before they got attacked. And talking about the prides, it's hard not to mention also the Warsaw Pride. This year in Warsaw, we had 80,000 people marching. It was surprising for everybody because even during the COVID, the number was growing and growing. This year, we reached 80,000 people. I think it is the 3rd year in a row when we did not have a single counter manifestation. And I really remember, the first prides. Also the Euro Pride that was organized in Poland, I don't remember how many years ago, when probably there were more counter protesters or counter participants than actually the pride goers, and definitely more police forces than the pride goers. And this year we had 80,000 people, not a single counter manifestation. So many things within the society are changing. And of course, there's the reality of big cities and small towns and villages. So this is why it's so important to work in small towns and villages. And this is something that is happening. We have now bigger NGOs who are giving funds for pro-LGBTQI organizations or just little events in towns and villages. And this is something that is happening, and the society is being changed in this way. And just let me stress one last thing, is the local government. And again, especially the cities in Poland, there are still these islands of freedom, and they really are. And it's very important also to stress that so the government, they are really weak in the cities. The biggest city they have a mayor at, I think is like 42nd biggest town in Poland. They don't have a mayor in any of the top 10 or even top 20, or I guess top 30 cities. So these cities, these mayors, many of them very progressive, they are providing services that the state is not providing in many areas, but in this case also in the area of LGBTQI. So if you go to Warsaw, and maybe you heard that the LGBT Declaration of Warsaw, which was the first declaration like that in our part of Europe, Central Eastern Europe, was the one that basically then made peace spin all their campaign before local and European elections about LGBTQI people. But the mayor of Warsaw dared to do it, dared to say LGBTQI people are welcome in the city, and we are gonna create policies to show that this is the city for everybody. I'm extremely proud myself that my party, we convinced mayor of Krakow, second biggest city in Poland, to have there an equality officer, and as a council member from our party. In Warsaw, the deputy mayor, who also comes from the Liberal Party, became also the speaker, the equality spokesperson of the mayor of Warsaw. So there are big changes in the cities, and of course, cities is not everything. We need to fight for equal rights everywhere. But the situation is not everywhere the same. And I'm really proud that many of the cities provide services kind of against the government, but services that are so much needed for the local community. For example, I was sharing with Marja, tomorrow we are starting in Warsaw a little international project with the European Liberal Forum about loneliness. We were studying this year the topic of loneliness in Europe, and on Friday we were going to visit a shelter for LGBTQI people. So especially important in the times of COVID, which was created as a partnership between the city and one of the oldest associations that fight for human rights. So on the city level, on the regional level, there are many positive messages that I could, tell you about. So I'm also very happy that there is a constant dialogue between, for example, city council members from the cities in Hungary and in Poland. I mean, Budapest in Poland. We are blessed compared to Hungary that we have more urban centers than Hungary, and I think this is a big difference. And also we see it in election results. And it's amazing that our city councillors talk to one another and visit one another, because there is a lot of inspiration on this ground level that we can learn from one another. Thank you.
My turn. A lot has already been said, but what I would like to stress is that also in the Netherlands, the LGBTIQ activism is something of the last 50 years, 50. So a lot has happened and a lot can be achieved in only 50 years. And I'm saying that to also be hopeful about the future. I agree with Anett that the LGBTIQ community, I mean, we're pretty smart activists. And I think that a lot of that has resulted in many changes over the years. And sometimes our wishes and our push for change is going a little bit too fast for some people. They can't keep up with our desire to change the things and to have more equal rights. I think a lot very important in that is, like Milosz said, is being visible. I've always said visibility comes before acceptance. When the LGBTIQ police network, the internal network, Roze in Blauw, Pink and Blue, was started, which was during the 1998 Gay Games in Amsterdam, there was also some backlash within the organization. Why, you want to integrate, so why do you want some separate place for lesbian and gay officers? Is that not counterproductive to what you want to accomplish, since you want to integrate? And that's why I always said, but visibility comes before acceptance. And now that there is a discussion on this issue, and also what Milosz said, it's a where there was indifference, people are now being encouraged and being forced almost to choose a side. And at least they are now thinking about it, thinking about issues that are larger than the LGBTI community. So how do we view people? Are we all equal? Should we all have equal rights? As far as the visibility aspect, I was actually in Kiev in 2018 in Ukraine for the European Lesbian Conference. And this was the second time this conference was held, and I was there out of my capacity as the vice president of the European LGBTI Police Association. We did a workshop there, but it was a heavily secured event. There were quite a few security officers and police officers in the venue. And the first day I looked at them, and I was there in uniform, and they looked at me like, what is this? And they looked very stern and very strict. And I thought, okay, well, they didn't speak English much, but I thought everybody understands good morning and thank you, and a smile. And I told myself, I have 3 days. And after 3 days, it was like the ice was broken. They were much more relaxed. They were handing out pieces of candy to the participants. They were joking with the participants. And I thought that was a wonderful example. And if that conference did not do anything, it did change a few minds within the Kiev Police Department. So that's what I want to add as an anecdote as to the importance of being visible, and hang in there. I know that Hungary and Poland are now dangling at the bottom of this Rainbow Europe Index, but you know, the Netherlands is your future too. We're not there yet, but at least we have things in place such as same-sex marriage. We have things in place such as a law that says that children in schools need to be taught about sexual diversity and gender identity. There are classes about citizenship where these kinds of issues are being discussed. Should there be a possibility for trans people to change their gender identity in their passport or their identity document? Those are all things that will be in your future. I know it. You know, we'll just all have to come back in a next life and we'll see how things have changed.
Thank you. Hopefully not our next lives, maybe this one. We will get it. Some interesting things.
I'm older than you, Márton. My next life.
So some things that were said. First of all, as I was preparing for today, I was also thinking about whether this, development of LGBTQ rights is a process, is the same process in Hungary or Poland is just, more at the beginning of the process than Netherlands, for example. It's hard to say. And something that Milosz said, for example, about there being no opposition at the Pride events, having the Warsaw Pride and no protesting against it is something very strange for Hungarians, because the opposing sentiment is so strong that we almost always have. In fact, all of these protests are fighting each other, trying to, one protest will say, okay, this is the route we take, and the other protest will say, okay, but what we want to do, we want to do the protests on this route first, and then, there's no more place, they have to go somewhere else, sort of to state strength. This is something that they do. And we talked about the Rainbow Europe measurements and how countries can move down and up. And maybe we will move up and up, or actually, if everything is the same process, maybe we will not move up because everyone else will be one step ahead of us all the time. But my next question is about the EU. Europe in general, the general trend of development of LGBTQ rights in Europe. What do you see? Where are we headed? We have some important developments, but also some terrible setbacks and some alarming events. So it's really hard to say where we are headed in terms of LGBTQ rights. And the other half of the question is, what do you think the EU's role is in this whole fight? Is there a role? How big of a role it is? So my first question was that, what do you see the EU is, where is it headed? And the second is, what's the role of the EU in this fight? And whoever would like to start, maybe somebody else, switch things up. Yeah, okay.
There's clearly plenty of room for the EU to do something here, and I think it's clear for all of us, because we believe in the EU. I believe, as we sit in the panel, as I know you, I have the privilege to know both panelists and also the moderator from before. The answer will be about the EU, but let me again start with the Polish context. So we as Polish people, we decided to join the EU, right? We're not forced to do that. We decided it in a referendum. And it was a very clear decision. It was not 50-50, 51-49. It was a very clear decision. And we decided to join it with the rules and join to the values. And now we have a problem because we have a government who is saying, no, not really. Maybe somewhere else we should go. Maybe you should be something else. And we have a government that is depriving a group of people of their rights. And we have a government also that is tolerating, probably you've heard, the so-called LGBT free zones, right? This isn't acceptable. The EU is a community of values. Even though Orban or Kaczynski are trying to tell to our people that EU is only money, and EU is only trade. No, EU is about the values. It's about the fundamental values that our people decided to to join, to be part of. And now, when in this community, one piece of land decides not to follow the values, decides, okay, the values are not binding here, it means that all European citizens are deprived of the values. And it goes like that about the rule of law, but the LGBTQI rights, this is a part of the rule of law, right? So if we have weak, rotten elements in this European jigsaw, in this European puzzle, it means that the entire puzzle, entire picture becomes rotten. It's not possible that the judiciary system is rotten only in Hungary, because if it's rotten only in Hungary and in Poland, it means it's rotten everywhere in Europe. And it's the same with the LGBTQI rights. If you have people, European citizens, who are deprived of their rights in Poland or Hungary, it means that all European citizens are deprived of the fundamental rights if they come to Poland and Hungary. And this is something the EU cannot accept, and this is something that EU has to protect, and I have no doubts about that. That EU should use all means possible, protecting its rules and values in every single corner of the European Union. And it's impossible to accept that rights of people are violated, because really it's not only about the rights of Hungarian or Polish citizens, it's rights of all the European citizens. And so the Dutch citizens or the Dutch government should fight equally, hard for the rule of law and LGBTQI rights in Poland and Hungary as Polish or Hungarian opposition, because this is the same. We're in the same community, and we cannot make it happen so that this community rots in one of these places. And obviously we can see that the EU learned their lesson a bit after getting us in 2004, because it was the only choice. But of course, not everything could have been foreseen. Nobody probably saw Kaczynski coming, like this kind of people rising. And right now, if you look at the negotiations in the Western Balkans and elsewhere, this is the part of the negotiations, and this was not really the part of when we were getting in. So EU learned its lessons a bit. And again, we all love talking about the Rainbow Europe Index. If you look at the score of countries like Albania, North Macedonia, Kosovo, they are worlds behind us. Why? Because A, this is a law on paper index. B, because the European Union is measuring it and is looking in this case at LGBTQI rights. I don't want to say they forced the governments there, but the EU has an impact on legislative changes there. So they learned their lesson, and now they have these laws that we don't have. And it's the transgender law in North Macedonia is much better than in Poland. In Hungary, I don't know. Probably yes. Probably also. So there is a huge role of the European Union, and I think it's the obligation of the European Union. And one thing I always stress, people like Orbán or Kaczynski, they understand only one language in the European context, and it's the language of money, really. It's the language of benefits and funds and money. And if this is the only way to make them play the game according to the rules, this is the only argument that the European authorities have to use, is the argument of money. And we can see that in Poland, this argument, if the EU plays the ball hard, is working. And in the context of the LGBTQI rights, it worked. So this is actually the only clear example that we have in Poland where the Polish government took a step back. And it's actually connected to the LGBTQI rights and with the regional funds, the cohesion funds. Again, you probably heard that many of the Polish municipalities, counties, and regions adopted the so-called anti-LGBT-free zone declarations. And the European Union said, okay, if you are a region that is LGBT-free zone, you have no access to European funds, to European cohesion funds, because the rights of a big chunk of the society are not respected there. And again, not only of Polish people, but of people from all over Europe. If you don't respect the rights, you will not get the funds, full stop. And because obviously these are the regions where peace has the majority in the regions, in regional assemblies, There was one phone call coming from Warsaw, from the peace headquarters, to all these presidents of this region saying, okay, we withdraw, we need this money, because without this money we will not deliver before next elections, we will not deliver our promises. And within a week, I think all of them were gone on the regional level, because it works only on the regional level. All of them were gone, because the European Union was very clear, you don't do that, you will lose the money. And so I think you just need to play hard with them and protect the rules with all the means you have.
Shall I? Yes. Yes, of course, the signs are gone, but the sentiment, of course, is still there. I don't have really a lot to add to what Milosz already said, except for to stress again how important it is to have this top-down support. I think the European Union needs to set a standard as to who we want to be in this union. And who we should want to be, as far as I'm concerned, is a place where people will feel safe to be who they are and will not feel judged because of who they are. It is true that when there is a small rotten piece in this jigsaw, as Milosz said, it reflects on the whole of the jigsaw puzzle. And, you know, on a personal note, I always think about where I go on vacation. And Hungary, honestly, and Poland would not be at the top of my list, because for the weeks that I am there on vacation, I would need to go back into the closet. And that's not just something that Hungary and Poland are examples of. Of course, there's many countries in the world where, you know, compared to those places, Hungary and Poland are probably heavenly. But still, as far as the question goes as to what needs to happen at the European Union level, yeah, as much as is possible on that European level, there needs to be solidarity among the countries that have a strong stance and conviction as to the importance of equality for all people. And this was a good example of what can happen if one of the European Union countries violates those European standards. So as far as I'm concerned, that needs to be the message continually. We are all one, well, we're all human, we're all equal, and we all need to be treated as such.
On one hand, we are trying to explain that rule of law is not something that you can receive a B+ or a B- from. So it should be at least A. And the European Union, this is my point of view, should play a role like it shows a picture, and we have to grow up for that. So this is our responsibility, this is our society, this is our history, and we have to fight for this right and these rights. This is really important. On the other hand, municipalities should play a huge role, as roughly 3 million of Hungarians live in a city or a town that is led by an opposition politician. So that's a huge mess, and we have a strong message that you are safe in here. And Budapest is, of course, as the capital, is really important, but there are a lot of LGBTQR people who basically fled. They had to flee, so they fled to Budapest, and they were really welcome over here. So the current city council was really motivated in keeping the rainbow flag in the Pride Month at the city hall's entrance for the whole month. So that's a really strong message, not just for the government, but also for the whole society. And but still, we have terrible examples over here in this city. So there was a Rainbow Foundation was sitting in my table, and they were asking me to organize a training for ticket controllers, especially for trans people, because they are often kicked off from public transport as they do not look like as their ID cards. And that's a terrible situation. It's so humiliating. So personally, I can take really small steps, but maybe it can mean a bigger step for the rainbow community, not just in Budapest, but all over in Hungary, that this is important for Hungarian politicians from the opposition side. These would be the most important steps to do in the whole alliance as we won these elections in 2019 in opposition coalitions. So we should never forget it, that we have to show up a different picture about the Hungarian society. We have to show up a new alternative that is not just comparable to the European values, but that keeps the European values. Because, I completely keep your point, or I'm on your point that this is a community of values, and we have to fight for this point also in the Hungarian media, which is not easy at the current situation, but we have to tell it to everyone. This is the only way to win back this country and also the society, the majority of the society.
Thank you. Yes, in the case of Budapest, we know that there has been many developments, and this is a real trend that in Hungary, LGBTQ people have to flee to Budapest. But even so, even though, as you mentioned, Milosz, with the EU can sort of regulate with money, and I think this is sort of important in the case of Budapest versus the Hungarian government, is that Budapest dares to support LGBTQ people and communities because they're not afraid of losing the money, because they already did, because they already don't get enough money. So there's not really the government. There's not really anything that the government can do to threaten these rights. On the other hand, the rest of Hungary also casts a shadow over Budapest itself. I think recently Budapest was downgraded as a travel destination, like you said, actually, partially because of this sort of anti-LGBTQ sentiment in Hungary, even though Budapest leads by example. But yes. Now to something completely different. These past few years have been years of crisis with COVID, and then Russia's invasion of Ukraine, economic crisis, energy crisis, all of these topics, it's everything, it's all that people talk about. And even the government, as Andrea mentioned in her intro, at first the elections were going to be about anti-LGBTQ and how LGBTQ people are dangerous to culture, and so, like Milosz said, that it's the same case in Poland. But after the war, they changed full on to sort of a campaign evolving around the war and the crisis and so on. And do you think that this happens anywhere else? Is this a trend that these crises sort of push the LGBTQ issue to the side and slow progress? What do you think about that?
Okay, my turn. Start. Yes, I do think that the LGBTIQ issues are potentially, if we allow it, pushed to the side because there are, in the eyes of the majority, more important issues to deal with right now. You know, the COVID pandemic affected all of us The war in Ukraine is affecting all of us, and with the LGBTIQ issues, I mean, of course, you could have a philosophical discussion about how this also affects all of us, really. But in reality, it's, what, 10-15% of the people who are personally affected by this. So there is indeed, in my opinion, a possibility that these larger issues are working as a tsunami as far as flooding the LGBTIQ struggle for equal rights. But like I said, unless we do not allow it to become a side issue, and that's why, again, it is so important to remain visible and to remain vocal about the issues that affect the LGBTIQ community, because we cannot put it on a break for a couple of years, because now that we are past the corona pandemic, hopefully, also the war in Ukraine will pass. You know, one of my life sayings is, this too shall pass, and that goes for the war in Ukraine too, and hopefully sooner than later. But there will always be another issue that, in the eyes of the majority, probably is more important than the struggle for equal rights for the LGBTIQ community. So we need to stay strong, and we need to straighten our backs. Straighten, that's kind of a pun, I suppose. But we need to not allow it to become a side issue. So let's stay vocal on it. Like I said earlier, the LGBTIQ community members are wonderful activists, very smart strategically, and I think that we can use that in order to still stay up at the forefront of the of this struggle for more equal rights, and not allow us to be pushed back on the back burner and wait for what, a better time? There will never be a better time. So yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that.
There's always something more important than LGBTQIs. Right, always, right? Always. My favorite thing that I've heard so many times is the mythical maturity of the society. The society is not mature enough, right? This is what they've been saying for all these years. Civil partnership, no, Polish society is not mature enough. Equal marriage, no, definitely not mature enough. Polish society is mature enough, like for all that, like clearly, Polish people are mature enough to get all that, and this is why we're fighting for all that, not because this is our extravaganza, but because we're fighting for rights that people want, people demand, and people are able to accept and are willing to accept, and we see it in many other countries. In this maturity of society, we're really there. And then crisis, war, COVID, there are always great excuses for little dictators, for people who love their own power for themselves, right-wing populists, however you want to call them. Perfect situation. An example, again from Poland, the abortion law. They changed the abortion law in the winter, middle of the COVID crisis. Why they did it then? Because they did not expect that people would go to protest on the streets. This was perfect timing for little autocrats, for little dictators. Just do it in the moment when people cannot go to the streets and cannot voice their anger. But COVID did not stop anybody. Like, we had mass demonstrations, and we had nights that Warsaw really looked like from a post-apocalyptic movie, because literally all the streets were blocked by young people just sitting on the streets. So no, I mean, if somebody is telling me now we need to do everything to be safe and secure, I'm saying, of course, safe and secure, but also free. Like, we cannot give up on our freedoms and rights in these difficult times, because they are difficult. I mean, we are doing everything to support Ukraine as much as we can. We were responsible as a society in the times of COVID, but at the same time, we're fighting for rights, and LGBTQI rights are just one of these rights we're fighting for, next to women's rights and other rights. So yeah, both. And we cannot accept that somebody is using this smokescreen of COVID, of war, against us.
Yes, these are excellent methods for governments like the Hungarian and the Polish one. Parliamentary debates at midnight. Once I landed at 6 o'clock in the morning at home, but just because I had to go to the university to hold the seminar at 8 o'clock. So the whole opposition was standing there roughly 10 hours or maybe more, because they started the debate at 11 p.m. and they hoped not to find anyone in the hall. So yeah, plenary sections or maybe cold winters are not enough to hide these processes that were built up in the opposition and that were built up in different social groups. Yeah, forgetting about these rights means that we forget about people. And what about women? 51% of the society. What about disabled persons? Roughly 5 up to 8% of the society. Or Roma minority, 5 up to 10%. So we should never forget every 20th person. This is what it means to forget about the rainbow community. So yeah, as Milosz mentioned, it is a great opportunity for these governments to change regulations and to damage fundamental rights in different social groups. Of course, yeah, there are simply methods, and there are two ways out of these crises. I think there's a kind of Euro-Atlantic way, but we didn't keep it, unfortunately, in this region. So, of course, every right, every person are important anyway, if it's an energy crisis or if it's caused by COVID-19. We should never forget anyone.
Thank you. Yes, of course, in Hungary we've seen how they can use the COVID or whatever. So, for example, have some new COVID regulations and then just put something outrageous in there about, you know, the family model or women's rights, and then if somebody attacks it, they're just like, oh, you don't want COVID regulations? Are you like anti-vaxxer? Even though you're just against that one little thing in the entire package of 70 different regulations that they hand in at the same time. But yes, I would love to ask some more questions, but I think we have to give the chance to other people as well. So I think I'm going to open the floor for the audience for questions. If somebody can take this microphone and take it there. Thank you. You can ask your questions in Hungarian or English, and it will be translated.
It works. You can hear it. So no cause to waste the time. So my question is that, first, we in Hungary know well that the churches are captured by the state. As for instance, the Bishop László Kisrigó in Szeged has a fortune about some billion euros. And I visited his restaurant in Szeged. That was the rudest restaurant in my life where I was visited. So the question is that how the churches can resist the authoritarian regimes. First, Poland. And my question addressed in 80% to Poland, and 20% to the free Benelux countries, because I mean the churches, they have more opportunities. As for instance, in my young age, when the AIDS came, then in Germany, the pastors at the Lutheran Church gave some contraceptive for the young people. So what possibilities to not to educate the people, but to keep the thinking of the people in healthy mind, for open mind, for acceptance in a free country and in a conservative country, which is similar to Hungary in many aspects. So what are the perspectives in Poland? And I'm finishing with that I have that photography in Cambridge of that church with that flag, with that multicolor flag. So where I can took some pictures, such a church in Poland, Netherlands, in Hungary.
You have churches like that in Poland where you can find the rainbow flag on it or in it, but they won't be Catholic churches. So I think this is the first thing, is that obviously Poland is predominantly a Catholic country, and the relation between the church, especially about the episcopate and the government, this is the issue. And you have many other churches, Protestants, or mostly Protestants, who are more friendly, like Lutheran or Reformed Church. But the problem is the connection between the church and the government. And of course, this is a topic for another debate about how it happened, that church is so influential, all the processes from the 80s and the Solidarity movement, and how church was close to the opposition, was one of the most important parts of the opposition, but we will not go there now because we don't have time. I don't think there is anything that can happen now, because the connections between the church and the government are so many, and this is like a spillover effect. They feed one another. Church gives the support to the government, clearly because they have the churches, the buildings, and every Sunday, many of the priests, they just accelerate the propaganda of the government, and before the election night or the election day, they say, go and vote this party. So the church delivers the services to the government. On the other side, the government gives many favors to the church. One is money, but the other one is also helping the political agenda of the episcopate. Again, going back to the abortion law, we had this change in abortion law because the church demanded it. It's not really, I don't really think it was the party that really wanted it, but the church demanded it. And every year the church leaders were meeting in Poland in the holy mountain Częstochowa, our most important monastery, and they were demanding every year abortion law. They have this fixation about human body, So they want to control the body of all people, and abortion is one thing, but also all the sexuality, including the homosexuality and LGBTQ in general. This is their obsession. So many of the changes we see in Poland are actually were demanded by the church, because church also wanted to see the success, and they are just like feeding one another. So nothing will change in next years. In 2023, we'll see again the church being a propaganda tube of the government, and again we'll see the government pumping billions of euros of Polish zlotys to different church foundations, because this is how the system works. What can be changed? I mean, people are also voting with their legs. People are leaving the church. We can see a wave of apostasia, this is the word in English, when people are leaving the church. We could see it very clearly. We have young celebrities who are doing it, and data, I mean, if you are a data person, we are waiting for the data from the census that we've just had. So I believe that this data will be devastating for the church. In the census 10 years ago, something like 95% of the Polish population declared that they are Catholic, that right now, I think these numbers will be for church really for the Catholic Church really devastating, because especially after the abortion law, but also after the support of the church towards this anti-LGBT madness, many young people officially are leaving the church. Like this is something that's happening now, has never probably happened in Poland, that people take the effort because, again, it's an effort. It's not a click online. You have to go to the church when you're baptized, fight with the priest who is trying to convince you not to get your birth certificate, then go to the church where you live, where in your area, to officially fill in the forms that you are leaving the church. So this is an effort, but people are doing it because they are so angry against the church, against everything they are doing, the church is doing against the people, against women, against minorities. So I think this is the only change. This is the only hope for the change for the church, is that so many people leave this organization, this institution, that the leadership will have this wake-up call that, okay, we are dying. In my hometown, I'm from a city of 400,000 people. We have a seminar. This year, 0 applicants. And it's not the only seminar like that in Poland, right? We were laughing for many years in Poland that the priests are our biggest export hit, that we export so many priests all over Europe, but also to other countries. Not anymore, because there are no more candidates, because people see what is happening. So really, I don't think we can see any short-term changes, but in a long-run perspective, the church will change, or it will follow the same path as many churches. Churches in the West will be just devastated by the lack of people, but also by all this movement that is happening against pedophilia in the church and the compensations and so on and so forth. So, yeah, this would be my answer.
Thank you. First of all, unfortunately, it sounds like Hungary. You just changed the city names, unfortunately. But on the other hand, I think there are 2 good points, and I really would love to be positive. The current Vatican waves are really good, and it can show up as a good alternative also for the Hungarian society and also for the Polish one. And I really hope that it will be a kind of light at the end of the tunnel, maybe. And the other positive point, that our societies were always able to watch each other and to learn from each other. And unfortunately, the current governments are causing really negative situations. But at the time of the regime change, especially liberals and Democrats caused really set up really positive waves and processes. So I really would love to believe that the current social groups will be enough strong to create once a strong rule of law and democracy, and also a strong church with solidarity and not with strong conservatism. That's my point. Thank you.
The Netherlands. Well, the Netherlands has, having listened to Milosz, a much more strict separation between church and state. Although, of course, it is also still intertwined, because politically, for instance, the more Christian, the political parties with a Christian denomination are voting more conservatively. I guess that it is not so much the Dutch society is a more agnostic society. So many people do have a connection to a church, but most people don't anymore. And forgive me if I don't have those numbers accurately, but the sense that I'm getting is that the Dutch society is more agnostic. What we do have is very many mosques in the greater cities and in the Netherlands as a whole, where people who are Muslim go and find their communities. Those, as far as the LGBTIQ concept goes, given that many of the people who go there have a North African background, Moroccan mostly, do still have very strong traditional values as far as the inacceptability of LGBTIQ feelings, I guess, of their family members. So that is still a struggle. Actually, there's an issue that I will be speaking on tomorrow evening when I'm back in Amsterdam, because the mayor of Amsterdam has asked the boards of the mosques in Amsterdam to sign a declaration of support to the LGBTIQ community, and they refused to. And they did so because they felt they were being, how do I say this in proper English, stigmatized as a community that is anti-LGBTIQ or more perpetrators of LGBTIQ hostility in the broadest sense of the word have a Moroccan or Muslim background. So they refused to sign that statement, and that has caused quite a bit of a ruckus in Amsterdam, but we'll have a debate on that tomorrow. So yeah, I guess that's my sense as far as the Dutch situation is concerned. Does that answer your question, sir? Does it? Thank you.
Do we have time for one more? If anyone else wants to ask a question? Okay. If not, then thank you. As a closing remark, I'm also a data person, and we were talking about how whether the problems of 10, 5, 15% are important in times where everyone is concerned with other issues. When you ask the Hungarian society whether they belong to a minority and how close they are to that minority, I think about 55% say they belong to a minority. So in that sense, minority rights affect the majority of Hungarians and probably everyone else. So when we talk about these issues, we don't just talk about 5 or 10% of the people, we talk about most of the people. So, but thank you for being here. Thank you for our panelists for taking part in the discussion, and thank you to the audience for listening to us. Don't go anywhere. We have a second panel with Hungarian experts. It is translated, so you can listen only in that. But for now, we have a little break, and thank you again for everyone for being here.